Okay, so today we're going to dive into something pretty heavy, but it's also incredibly important. We're talking about power, justice, and the truth. And just to be clear, this isn't about getting into gossip or rumors. It's really about understanding how power can be twisted and why it's more crucial than ever for all of us to think for ourselves.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? In a world that's just flooded with information, with headlines and opinions flying everywhere, how in the world do you tell what's real from what's just noise, especially with a story this big? Well, let's try and figure that out.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with a lesson in power. Then we'll decode what everyone means when they talk about the files. After that, we'll look at the danger of powerful networks, pull out 4 lessons you can actually use, and wrap up with how to think before you believe anything you see online.
Okay, let's get into our first section, a lesson in power. To really get what's going on here, we have to understand the core conflict. This whole thing is so much bigger than just one person. It's really a masterclass in how power can be abused.
So, at the center of all this is a man named Jeffrey Epstein. And this guy, he was extremely wealthy, and he had connections to all sorts of influential people. We're talking politics, business, you name it. But he was also accused of some incredibly serious, horrible crimes.
And this is where it gets really jarring. Look at this. On one hand, you've got this immense, almost unbelievable wealth and influence. And on the other hand, you have these truly terrible accusations. That clash, that tension right there, that's the heart of this whole story.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's something that's supposed to be the foundation of our society, right? No matter how rich you are, how famous you are, or who you know, the law is supposed to apply to everyone, period. And a case like this, well, it puts that idea to the ultimate test.
All right, moving on, let's talk about the files. I'm sure you've heard that term thrown around a lot, and honestly, it's caused a ton of confusion and speculation. So, our job here is to cut through all that and figure out what's fact and what's just, well, fiction.
So what are these files anyway? Are they some secret spy documents? Not really. When we talk about the files, we're basically talking about official paperwork. Think court records, testimonies where people swore to tell the truth, and all the stuff investigators collect. They're literally the building blocks for any legal case.
And what these documents do is help investigators create a map of what happened. It's like putting together a giant puzzle. They help show who knew who. They create a timeline of when things happened. And they lay out all the evidence, both for and against the claims.
Okay, and this is probably the single most important thing to understand in this whole explainer. Just because someone's name shows up in one of these documents, maybe in a flight log, maybe in an address book, that does not, and I mean not, automatically mean they're guilty of anything. Being associated with someone isn't proof of a crime. It's a lead, not a conviction. They are two very, very different things.
Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit and look at something bigger that this case really brings to light: the danger of powerful networks. We're talking about how one person's power gets magnified, like 100 times over, when they're plugged into a whole system of other powerful people.
So you might be wondering, how do these networks even get started? Well, it's pretty simple actually. It's when powerful people all hang out in the same places. They go to the same fancy parties, they fly on the same private jets, their business and social lives just completely overlap. And over time, all those little connections weave together into this really tight, almost invisible web.
And that brings up a really important question, doesn't it? Why does a network like that make it so hard for investigators to find the truth? What is it about this web of connections that can act like a shield?
Well, the bottom line is, power can influence systems. It can create roadblocks. But, and this is a really big but, there's a hopeful side to this too. This whole case proves that even with all those obstacles, the truth can fight its way to the surface. It shows that investigations can work and that our justice system, even if it's slow and imperfect, can still get there in the end.
Okay, we've gone through the details of the case, but what does it all mean for you? For us? Let's distill this down into 4 lessons that we can actually use in our own lives. This is where we turn this big, complicated story into personal wisdom. All right, lesson number 1. Don't automatically trust someone just because they have a lot of money or a famous name. Status and character are 2 totally different things. Number 2, get in the habit of questioning what you see and hear. Just ask yourself, okay, but how do they know that? Number 3 is huge. Understand the difference between an accusation and actual proof. They are not the same. And finally, number 4, maybe the most important of all, always, always stand up for justice and for those who can't stand up for themselves.
And that last lesson really connects to this quote right here. The strongest people are not the richest. The strongest people are those who protect others. You know, real strength isn't about how much money you have, it's about what you do for other people.
Okay, for our last section, let's bring this right down to earth. Let's talk about scrolling on your phone. How do we take all this and actually use it when we're online? Think of this as your survival guide for navigating the internet's wild west of information.
You know how it is. A huge story like this breaks, and social media just goes nuts. You see famous names being thrown around left and right, usually with zero context. You see these crazy, shocking headlines that are just designed to make you click. And of course, there's the tidal wave of pure emotion, anger, outrage, everything. So how do you handle that? The smartest thing you can do is just pause, take a breath. And before you share or even form a strong opinion, just run through this quick checklist in your head. Ask yourself, 1, where is this information really coming from? 2, has anyone else, like a real news organization, confirmed it? 3, is this an official source, like a court document? And 4, is this a fact or is it just somebody's hot take?
Look, the whole point of breaking all this down isn't to make you scared or cynical. Not at all. It's the opposite. It's about giving you awareness, because awareness is power. The world is definitely a complicated place, but it's important to remember that truth and justice are real too.
And at the end of the day, it all comes back to this one powerful idea. Educated minds are the strongest defense against corruption. A mind that knows how to think for itself, that can spot the difference between a real fact and a rumor, that is the best tool we have to fight back against this stuff. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. Now that you're armed with this awareness, how are you going to use it? How will you use it to think a little deeper and to stay strong out there? Thanks for digging into this with me today.